Hollywood is buzzing with shock tonight after what insiders are calling the most explosive destruction of a nice guy persona in late-night television history. Angelina Jolie, the Academy Award-winning actress and renowned humanitarian, had a complete meltdown on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon following a confrontation so intense that security had to intervene. What should have been a friendly promotional appearance by one of Hollywood's most respected figures turned into a career-defining moment that shattered Jimmy Fallon's carefully crafted image as television's most harmless host. Make sure you smash that subscribe button because this story contains exclusive behind-the-scenes details that will completely destroy your faith in late-night television's nice guys. The shocking truth about what happens when authentic passion meets manufactured charm goes deeper than anyone imagined, and we've got insider information that reveals the calculated manipulation hiding behind Jimmy's boyish grin. According to sources close to the production, Angelina Jolie had been reluctant to do traditional talk show appearances for years, preferring to focus on her humanitarian work and directing career rather than the typical celebrity promotion circuit. But her team had specifically chosen Jimmy's show because of his reputation as the safest, most supportive host in late-night television. They believed his gentle, enthusiastic approach would provide the perfect platform for discussing her latest film and her ongoing work with refugees worldwide. "Angelina doesn't do a lot of talk shows because she finds most of them superficial," revealed a longtime member of Jolie's inner circle who witnessed the devastating aftermath. But Jimmy seemed different, genuinely nice, supportive of serious causes, someone who would respect her work and her privacy. She actually looked forward to having a conversation with someone who seemed to care about more than just entertainment. She had no idea she was walking into a trap disguised as enthusiasm. The red flags started appearing during the pre-interview coordination process, but they were hidden behind Jimmy's trademark enthusiasm and seemingly genuine interest in Angelina's humanitarian work. His producers seemed unusually focused on her personal life, particularly her high-profile divorce and custody battles, claiming they wanted to show her human side to audiences who might only know her as a glamorous movie star. "They kept pushing for really personal content," explained a publicist familiar with the booking process. "They said Jimmy wanted to have a real conversation about balancing motherhood with her career, about how she handles criticism, about finding love again after divorce. We thought it was Jimmy being supportive of working mothers and showing genuine interest in her life beyond the movies." Behind the scenes, crew members described an atmosphere that felt different from Jimmy's typical celebrity bookings. The host was reportedly spending unusual amounts of time studying tabloid coverage of Angelina's personal struggles, researching her most controversial moments, and preparing what staff described as surprisingly invasive questions about topics she had specifically asked to avoid. Jimmy had this whole research file about Angelina's custody battle, her relationship with Brad Pitt, even stuff about her health scares, recalled a production assistant who witnessed the disturbing preparations. "It was weird because Jimmy usually keeps things light and fun, but he kept talking about wanting to see the real Angelina, the one behind the composed public image. It felt like he was planning to push her buttons." What made the situation even more sinister was Jimmy's well-documented pattern of using his nice guy persona to get celebrities to drop their guard, then exploiting their vulnerability for viral moments. Industry insiders reveal that the Tonight Show host has a history of pushing supposedly harmless questions until guests become uncomfortable, then using their reactions as content for social media clips and late-night comedy shows. Jimmy's whole brand is built on being the non-threatening guy who makes celebrities feel safe, explained a former show writer who left after becoming uncomfortable with the host's increasingly manipulative tactics. But that safety is an illusion. He gets people to open up by seeming harmless, then he uses their honesty against them. He's especially good at targeting strong women who don't usually show vulnerability. The tension escalated when Angelina arrived at the studio, bringing her characteristic grace and genuine commitment to using her platform responsibly. Witnesses described the actress as being cautiously optimistic about the interview, hoping to discuss her directorial work and raise awareness for refugee issues. Her authentic desire to make a positive impact made what Jimmy was planning seem even more calculated and cruel. But Jimmy's behavior during their pre-show meeting immediately raised red flags among staff who had worked with both personalities. Angelina was being her usual professional self, talking about her film and her work with the UN, observed a stage manager who's facilitated hundreds of celebrity interviews. But Jimmy was asking these really personal questions about her kids, her ex-husband, her dating life, stuff that had nothing to do with why she was there. You could see her getting uncomfortable with how invasive he was being. Behind closed doors, makeup artists and wardrobe staff noticed that Jimmy kept steering conversations toward Angelina's most sensitive topics, probing for emotional reactions that could be exploited on camera. He kept bringing up her father, her health issues, her custody arrangements, all the stuff that makes her vulnerable, revealed a makeup artist who worked with both stars. Angelina was trying to redirect to her work, but Jimmy seemed determined to get some kind of emotional reaction from her. The backstage atmosphere grew increasingly tense as showtime approached. Angelina, with her natural protective instincts, honed by years of dealing with invasive media, began showing signs of wariness as she picked up on Jimmy's hidden agenda. Meanwhile, the host was reportedly making last-minute adjustments to his planned approach, adding questions that his own producers privately described as potentially explosive and crossing boundaries. You could feel the setup building, described an audience coordinator who helped seat guests before the taping. The crew was uncomfortable because they could see Jimmy was planning to ambush someone who had trusted his nice guy reputation. Angelina came there to promote her work and help refugees, and Jimmy was preparing to attack her at her most vulnerable points for entertainment. As the cameras prepared to roll, and Angelina took her position with characteristic poise, production, assistants were already expressing concern about what they feared was about to happen. The collision between Angelina's guarded authenticity and Jimmy's manipulative enthusiasm was about to create a television moment that would expose the dark truth behind late-night television's most beloved nice guy. Nobody could have predicted just how far Jimmy would push one of Hollywood's most private stars, or how explosively Angelina would respond when his mask finally slipped. What unfolded next will go down as one of the most shocking betrayals of trust in late-night television history. As the cameras rolled and Jimmy delivered his opening monologue, viewers immediately noticed something different about his energy. Beneath his trademark enthusiasm lurked something predatory, the calculated gleam of someone preparing to exploit vulnerability disguised as genuine interest. When he introduced Angelina Jolie, his tone carried an undercurrent of false intimacy that made seasoned industry professionals deeply uncomfortable. Please welcome one of Hollywood's most fascinating women. Actress, director, humanitarian, and let's be honest, survivor of some pretty intense tabloid scrutiny, Angelina Jolie. The introduction was loaded with ominous undertones that immediately signaled this wasn't going to be the respectful interview Angelina had been promised. When she walked onto the stage with her characteristic elegance and guarded warmth, the contrast between her dignified professionalism and Jimmy's hidden agenda was painful to witness. The interview began with seemingly innocent questions about her latest directorial project, but viewers who understand manipulative interview tactics could see Jimmy laying elaborate traps with surgical precision. Angelina, still believing she was dealing with television's most trustworthy host, responded with measured thoughtfulness about her work and her hope that the film would shed light on important historical events. You know, Angelina, you've had such an incredible journey in this industry, Jimmy said with his trademark grin that seemed more sinister than usual. From your early days as this wild child actress to becoming this serious filmmaker and humanitarian. It's really quite a transformation. Some might say it's almost like you've reinvented yourself completely after all the challenges in your personal life. The way Jimmy emphasized transformation and challenges was like a verbal landmine, suggesting that Angelina's evolution as an artist and activist was somehow damage control rather than genuine growth. But Angelina, with her natural grace and years of media experience, handled the subtle provocation with characteristic poise. "I think we all grow and change through our experiences, Jimmy," she replied carefully. "The work I do now, both in film and with refugees, comes from a desire to use whatever platform I have to tell important stories and help people who don't have voices. That's always been authentic to who I am." The response was perfectly diplomatic, acknowledging growth while redirecting to her humanitarian work. Any decent host would have celebrated this evolution and used it to highlight meaningful causes. But Jimmy Fallon had no interest in meaningful causes, and what he did next revealed the calculated cruelty hiding behind his boyish charm. "Authentic. I love that word," Jimmy said with fake enthusiasm that made several audience members shift uncomfortably. "Though I have to ask, and forgive me for being a little nosy here, because that's what we do on late-night TV, but how do you separate what's authentic from what's, let's call it, strategic? I mean, the timing of your humanitarian work really ramping up right around your divorce proceedings. Some people might wonder if that was coincidence or clever PR management." The studio fell into uncomfortable silence. Jimmy had just suggested that Angelina's work with refugees, which had actually begun years before her marriage ended, was somehow calculated to improve her image during her divorce. The cruel implication that her compassion for the world's most vulnerable people was fake hit the air like a physical assault. Angelina's composure flickered for just a moment, her eyes flashing with something that made everyone in the room recognize they were witnessing the exact moment trust died. "I'm sorry, Jimmy, but I think there may be some confusion about the timeline of my work," she said with ice-cold precision. "I've been working with the UN Refugee Agency since 2001. My commitment to refugee issues has nothing to do with my personal life." But Jimmy wasn't interested in facts or corrections. He was interested in viral moments and emotional reactions, and he wasn't finished with his systematic assault on her character and motives. "Oh, absolutely, you're right about the timeline," he said with mock contrition that fooled no one. "But you have to admit, the visibility of that work, the way it's been positioned in the media, it's been really helpful for your image during some tough personal times, hasn't it?" The attack on her motivations for helping refugees was breathtaking in its calculated cruelty. Jimmy had taken Angelina's most meaningful work, advocacy that had brought attention to global crises and raised millions for displaced people, and reduced it to a publicity strategy. Several audience members looked genuinely disturbed by what they were witnessing. Those sitting close to the stage could see Angelina's hands trembling slightly as she processed the betrayal by someone she had trusted to treat her work with respect. "Jimmy, I'm not sure what you're trying to accomplish here," she said, her voice steady, but everyone could hear the controlled anger underneath. "My work with refugees isn't about image management. It's about human beings who have lost everything and need help." Jimmy, apparently energized by having struck a nerve, doubled down with the kind of calculated viciousness that would define his downfall. "Human beings, absolutely. And I'm sure your motives are pure. It's just, when you look at the pattern, the high-profile adoptions during career lulls, the UN appointments during personal scandals, the documentary work when you needed award season buzz, it all seems so perfectly timed, doesn't it?" The suggestion that Angelina had adopted children and worked with international organizations for career benefits was so fundamentally evil that several audience members actually gasped audibly. Jimmy had just attacked her motherhood and her humanitarian work in the same breath, suggesting that her most sacred commitments were calculated career moves. Angelina sat perfectly still for what felt like an eternity, her famous self-control masking what everyone could see was volcanic fury building beneath the surface. When she finally spoke, Her voice carried a deadly quiet that made smart people step back. "Jimmy," she said slowly, each word precisely enunciated, "I think we need to be very clear about something. My children, all of my children, are my greatest joy and my most important responsibility. My work with refugees comes from seeing firsthand the suffering of people who have been forgotten by the world. Neither of these things is a career strategy." The rebuke was devastating in its controlled fury, but Jimmy seemed oblivious to the danger he was in. Instead of backing down, he made the mistake that would trigger the most explosive celebrity meltdown in late-night television history. Of course, I didn't mean to suggest," he said with fake concern. "It's just that when you're a public figure, everything becomes part of your narrative, right? Even the most personal things, your kids, your relationships, your causes, they all become part of the Angelina Jolie brand. And let's be honest, that brand has been through some pretty rough patches lately, hasn't it?" The attack on her brand combined with the continued implication that her children and humanitarian work were calculated. Image management was the final straw that would unleash decades of controlled fury at invasive media treatment. What happened next will be remembered as one of the most spectacular celebrity explosions in television history. The suggestion that her children and humanitarian work were part of a brand strategy was the nuclear bomb that detonated decades of Angelina's carefully controlled fury at invasive media treatment. When one of Hollywood's most composed stars finally lost it, the destruction was absolute and terrifying to witness. "Brand?" Angelina's voice started quiet, but began building, with the kind of dangerous energy that makes smart people run for cover. "Did you just reduce my children to elements of a brand?" The second time she said it, her voice carried such force that Jimmy actually recoiled in his chair, his fake smile finally cracking as he realized he had awakened something beyond his ability to control. "You want to talk about my brand, Jimmy?" Angelina continued, standing up from her chair with such sudden intensity that the entire studio audience jumped. "Let me tell you about my brand. My brand is holding dying children in refugee camps while the world ignores them. My brand is fighting for custody of my own children while people like you suggest I adopted them for publicity." The studio was in complete chaos. This wasn't the composed, diplomatic Angelina Jolie the world was used to seeing. This was raw, unfiltered fury from a woman who had reached her absolute breaking point with media exploitation disguised as entertainment. Security personnel immediately moved closer, but they seemed frozen by the sheer force of her rage. Jimmy, clearly in over his head, attempted to backtrack with nervous laughter. "Angelina, hey, I think you're misunderstanding what I meant. We're just having a conversation here. Maybe we should take it down a notch? This is supposed to be fun." "Fun?" Angelina's voice reached levels that seemed to shake the very foundations of Studio 6B. "You think attacking my motivations for helping refugees is fun? You think questioning whether I love my children is entertainment? What is wrong with you, Jimmy?" By now, the show's executive producer had rushed onto the stage, desperately trying to manage a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. But Angelina was in full fury mode now, channeling years of frustration with invasive media coverage and fake nice guys who exploited trust for content. "You know what your problem is, Jimmy?" she continued, her voice now carrying the kind of controlled rage that comes from someone who has finally had enough. "You hide behind this nice guy act, this harmless goofball persona, while you do exactly what every other predatory interviewer does. You exploit people's trust to create viral moments at their expense." The accusation of predatory behavior hung in the air like a live grenade. Several audience members were openly recording on their phones now, knowing they were witnessing the complete destruction of Jimmy's carefully crafted image in real time. Jimmy, his face now pale and sweating, made another desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Predatory? Come on, Angelina, that's a pretty strong word. I'm just asking questions here. This is what talk shows do. we have conversations about real life. Real life? Angelina's laugh was harsh and utterly without humor. Jimmy, real life is me working 18-hour days in refugee camps, seeing things that would give you nightmares for years. Real life is fighting legal battles to protect my children's privacy while people like you turn their existence into talking points. Real life is not your manufactured controversy designed to get Twitter mentions. The audience was transfixed by the raw power and authenticity pouring from the stage. This wasn't a celebrity tantrum. This was a masterclass in calling out media manipulation. A woman defending her most sacred commitments against someone who had weaponized her trust. Jimmy, clearly realizing his career was imploding in real time, made one final attempt to regain control. "Security!" he called out frantically. "We need to... Angelina's clearly having some kind of episode here. We need to get this situation under control." The suggestion that her justified fury was a mental health crisis was the final insult that sent Angelina into the stratosphere of righteous rage. She turned toward Jimmy with such intensity that he actually pushed his chair back from his desk. "Episode?" she repeated, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than her shouting. "The only episode here is your pathetic attempt to destroy someone's reputation for entertainment value. You invited me onto your show, under false pretenses, then attacked everything I hold sacred. My children, my work, my integrity." The studio had fallen into absolute silence, everyone understanding they were witnessing not just a celebrity meltdown, but a moral reckoning that would define both careers forever. "You want to know what real integrity looks like, Jimmy?" Angelina continued, her voice gaining power with every word. "Real integrity is using your platform to help people instead of exploiting them. Real integrity is respecting boundaries instead of crossing them for content. Real integrity is being honest about who you are instead of hiding behind a fake nice guy act." By now, security was actively moving toward the stage, but Angelina's obvious moral authority made them hesitant to treat her as anything other than someone defending herself against abuse. "Mr. Jolie," the head of security said carefully, approaching, like someone trying to calm a rightfully angry person, "we need you to please... Don't you dare try to manage me." Angelina whirled around, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made the security chief actually step backward. "I am not the problem here. The problem is a host who lures guests with promises of respectful interviews, then ambushes them with personal attacks for viral content." Jimmy, in a moment of desperation that would seal his fate forever, made one last attempt to paint himself as the victim. "Look, everyone can see what's happening here," he said to the audience with fake concern. "This is exactly why some celebrities get a reputation for being difficult. I ask a few normal questions and suddenly, I'm the bad guy." That final attempt to gaslight the situation was the match that lit the last fuse. Angelina turned back to Jimmy with such devastating authority that the entire studio seemed to hold its breath. "Difficult?" she said with deadly calm. "Jimmy, I've negotiated with warlords to get aid to refugees. I've sat across from world leaders fighting for policy changes. I've handled divorce proceedings under global scrutiny while protecting my children's privacy. But sitting here listening to you weaponize my life for cheap entertainment? That is the most difficult thing I've done all year." And with that crushing final assessment, Angelina gathered her dignity and began walking toward the exit, but not before delivering the television moment that would end Jimmy's career forever. The fallout from Angelina Jolie's volcanic eruption began before she even reached the studio exit. Within seconds, cell phone footage from horrified audience members was exploding across every social media platform on Earth. Despite NBC Security's frantic attempts to confiscate recording devices, by the time Angelina had left the building, still radiating the moral authority that comes from defending your children and life's work, Angelina Was Right was trending globally with over 180 million views in the first 3 hours alone, making it one of the most watched celebrity meltdowns in internet history. What happened backstage in those crucial moments has been described by witnesses as both inspiring and heartbreaking. Angelina wasn't out of control when she got to her dressing room, revealed a makeup artist who comforted the actress. She was crystal clear about what had just happened. She kept saying, "He used my trust against me, and how dare he attack my children for content." Even in her fury, she was processing how this betrayal represented everything wrong with modern media. Meanwhile, Jimmy sat alone on his destroyed stage, his trademark smile replaced by the pale, sweaty face of someone who had just committed career suicide on live television. The studio audience filed out in unprecedented silence, with many viewers openly expressing their shock at witnessing television's supposed nice guy revealed as a manipulative predator. "I can't believe what I just saw," said one audience member whose emotional reaction video would later accumulate 90 million views. "Jimmy Fallon just attacked Angelina Jolie's children and her refugee work. That wasn't entertainment. That was evil." Behind closed doors at NBC, emergency crisis meetings were already underway, as executives realized they were facing the most catastrophic celebrity incident in network history. The phones were ringing before Angelina even left the building, disclosed a network insider who witnessed the executive panic firsthand. This wasn't just bad publicity. This was the complete destruction of Jimmy's brand as the harmless, supportive host. He had just revealed himself as someone who attacks mothers and humanitarian workers for ratings. But the real earthquake came when Angelina's representatives released a statement that sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry and beyond. Unlike typical Hollywood damage control, this response carried the moral weight of someone whose life had been weaponized. For entertainment, Ms. Jolie accepted Mr. Fallon's invitation, believing she was speaking with someone who respected boundaries and valued meaningful conversation, the statement read. Instead, she was subjected to a calculated attack on her motivations as a mother and humanitarian. What happened tonight represents the worst of media exploitation disguised as harmless entertainment. The revelation that Jimmy had systematically betrayed the trust of one of the world's most respected humanitarian figures completely changed how the public viewed his nice guy persona. Within hours, other celebrities began sharing their own stories of Jimmy's manipulative interview tactics, painting a picture of a host who used false friendliness to extract vulnerable moments for viral content. The entertainment industry's response was unprecedented in its speed and unanimity. A-list celebrities, particularly mothers and humanitarian advocates, began publicly supporting Angelina while condemning Jimmy's tactics. "What Jimmy did was unforgivable," tweeted one Oscar-winning actress, whose comment received 18 million likes within hours. Angelina has saved countless lives through her refugee work and raised 6 children with grace under impossible scrutiny. Attacking her for doing both is beyond disgusting. Perhaps most damaging to Jimmy was the response from the humanitarian community worldwide. The UN Refugee Agency issued a rare statement defending Angelina's work and condemning the trivialization of refugee advocacy. Major aid organizations began pulling their support from NBC programs, and refugee advocacy groups started boycotting The Tonight Show. What Mr. Fallon did was attack not just Ms. Jolie, but the entire concept of using celebrity platforms for humanitarian good, wrote one prominent aid worker whose post went viral. The ratings collapse was immediate and historically catastrophic. Jimmy's show lost 90% of its audience in the week following the incident, with major sponsors fleeing so rapidly that entire episodes had to be canceled due to lack of advertising support. Industry analysts began openly questioning whether The Tonight Show could survive what many were calling the most self-destructive interview in television history. Meanwhile, Angelina experienced something remarkable in her decades-long career: universal support, not just as an actress, but as a mother and humanitarian who had been unjustly attacked for her most sacred commitments. Her social media following, exploded as people discovered the true scope of her humanitarian impact. The refugee policies she had influenced, the millions of dollars she had donated, the children she had literally saved from war zones. Angelina showed us what real strength looks like, posted one fan whose comment received 12 million likes. She didn't just defend herself. She defended every mother who's been questioned about their love for their children, every humanitarian who's been accused of doing good work for selfish reasons. Jimmy tried to destroy her, and she destroyed him instead with nothing but truth. The incident sparked what media experts are calling the Fallon effect, a global conversation about the manipulation tactics used by supposedly harmless entertainment figures. Psychology programs began analyzing Jimmy's interview techniques as textbook examples of emotional manipulation, disguised as friendliness. Journalism schools started using the incident to teach the difference between legitimate questioning and exploitative harassment. 18 months later, the consequences have reshaped both entertainment culture and Jimmy's career permanently. The Tonight Show remains on the air, but Jimmy has become a pariah among A-list celebrities and humanitarian figures. His nice guy brand has been permanently destroyed, replaced by a reputation as someone who weaponizes trust for viral content. Multiple sources confirm that NBC executives have been quietly seeking his replacement, unable to rebuild the show's credibility with Jimmy as host. Angelina, meanwhile, has been elevated to iconic status as someone who successfully defended the concepts of motherhood and humanitarian work against media exploitation. She's received honors from major aid organizations. Universities have created scholarships in her name focusing on refugee advocacy, and her humanitarian work has gained renewed global attention from people inspired by her passionate defense of vulnerable populations. Sometimes you have to fight not just for yourself, but for the principles that define who you are, she said in her only extended comment about the incident during a recent UN refugee summit. When someone attacks your children or your commitment to helping others, silence isn't an option. Truth is the only weapon that matters. The quote has become a rallying cry for humanitarian workers and protective parents worldwide. The Angelina Jolie versus Jimmy Fallon showdown will be remembered as the moment when authentic passion triumphed over manufactured charm, when motherhood and humanitarian work were defended against media exploitation, and when the world finally saw through the fake nice guy act that had fooled them for years. It proved that some things are too sacred to attack without consequences, and that genuine moral authority will always triumph over calculated manipulation disguised as entertainment. What did you think about this explosive destruction of Jimmy's nice guy facade? Was his attack on Angelina's children and humanitarian work the end of his career as we know it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Smash that subscribe button for more shocking celebrity revelations, and hit that notification bell so you never miss the stories that expose the fake personalities hiding behind manufactured charm in Hollywood.